On May 8th, Ukraine commemorated the Day of Remembrance and Reconciliation, День пам'яті та примирення. This holiday, primarily commemorating the end of the Second World War in Europe, was introduced in Ukraine as a counterbalance to the Soviet Victory Day, which is celebrated on May 9th. The rationale for this move lies in a history that is not so widely known in Ukraine. The war in Europe ended with the surrender of Nazi Germany. The document of capitulation was signed in Reims, France, on May 7, 1945, and became effective on May 8th. However, at that time, Joseph Stalin, the dictator of the Soviet Union, was very displeased with this act of surrender because it was submitted to the Allies and not to the Soviets. So he insisted on organizing another ceremony in Berlin. That ceremony took place on May 8th, but at a time when it was already May 9th in Moscow. And this is why Victory Day falls on May 9th. May 8th is known as VE Day, or Victory in Europe Day.
Друга світова війна не закінчилася ні 8, ні 9 травня, ні 7 травня. Вона насправді закінчилася капітуляцією Японії 2 вересня. І тому в першу чергу це дійсно дата приурочена до закінчення війни у Європі.
While Western countries generally commemorate the end of the Second World War on May 8th as a day of remembrance of those who perished in the war, the Soviet Union and Eastern Bloc countries were required from the 1960s to celebrate, on May 9th, Victory Day. Victory Day celebrations were an important part of Soviet propaganda, since they promoted and crafted an image of the military might and prowess of the quote-unquote invincible Soviet army. May 9th continues to be celebrated with extraordinary pomp and splendor in Russia today. Although May 9th is still a holiday in Ukraine for those who choose to celebrate it, May 8th was introduced in 2015 as an official state holiday. This was done within a broader framework of a campaign of decommunization in Ukraine. Also, instead of extolling military victories that at the same time extinguished many lives, the May 8th commemoration is a much more low-key affair. Its objective is to pay homage to those who perished in the war and to promote reconciliation between veterans who fought in various armies, as well as between their descendants, some of whom today are fighting shoulder to shoulder in defense of Ukraine.
Це не свято і навіть не перемога, тому що було дуже багато загиблих людей, невинно загиблих від бездарної політики, від бездарних вчинків радянської влади.
Я вважаю, що правильний формат вибрали святкування, те, що це має бути не як колись паради, там гучні святкування, а молитва і тиха пам'ять про рідних і близьких.
On May 5th, the Kyiv and Kyiv Historical and Cultural Preserve, Kyivo-Pecherski Zapovidnik, presented a collection of Egyptian antiquities that had been discovered earlier this year in storage. These artifacts include 2 ancient mummies and 2 painted sarcophagi. One of the mummies is presumably that of a young woman, who may have died as long ago as in the 11th century BC.
Положення рук цієї мумії є більш характерним для чоловічих поховань. У жінок зазвичай руки були покладені вздовж тіла. Можливо, унікальність цієї мумії, що вона належить до тієї невеликої групи жіночих поховань, які були поховані за обрядом чоловіків.
The other mummy is that of a large crocodile, over 1.5 meters long. Crocodiles were considered sacred and were greatly revered in ancient Egypt. Such large crocodile mummies are overall quite rare in Europe.
Їх тримали при храмі. Після того, як ця тварина вмирала, її муміфікували і ховали на спеціальному некрополі. На всю Італію є 3 чи 2 крокодили такого рівня, такого розміру в Туринському музеї. І в музеї Неаполя є ще один. Все. Один великий крокодил є в Британському музеї, вони їм дуже пишаються.
It is not quite clear how these artifacts ended up in the Kyiv and Kyiv monastery. Most probably, they had been brought to Ukraine in the late 19th century by private collectors, perhaps the Kanenko family. Both mummies require careful study and considerable restoration. However, the preserve decided to make these artifacts available for public viewing for one day, on May 18th. The discovery of these antiques gives us hope that perhaps many more unexpected treasures can still be found in the vast storage areas of Ukrainian museums. I'm Tania Stech. And this was Ukraine in the news.
Канал 1+1 тепер доступний на Bell International Programming.